Emergency medical service is considered to be fully funded by the state. Emergency medicine reform is also an important part of the healthcare reform. In addition, patients who suffer from chronic diseases, which cause a high toll of disability and mortality, are provided with free or low-price medicine. 367. Education. The University of Kyiv is one of Ukraine's most important educational institutions. The residence of Bukovinian and Dalmatian metropolitans by Joseph Lavka, 1882, now Chernivtsi University. According to the Ukrainian constitution, access to free education is granted to all citizens. Complete general secondary education is compulsory in the state schools, which constitute the overwhelming majority. Free higher education in state and communal educational establishments is provided on a competitive basis. 368. Because of the Soviet Union's emphasis on total access of education for all citizens, which continues today, the literacy rate is an estimated 99.4%. 45. Since 2005, an 11-year school program has been replaced with a 12-year one. Primary education takes 4 years to complete, starting at age 6. Middle education, secondary, takes 5 years to complete. Upper secondary then takes 3 years. 369. Students in the 12th grade take government tests, which are also referred to as school-leaving exams. These tests are later used for university admissions. Among the oldest is also the Lviv University, founded in 1661. More higher education institutions were set up in the 19th century, beginning with universities in Kharkiv, 1805, Kyiv, 1834, Odessa, 1865, and Chernivtsi, 1875. And a number of professional higher education institutions, for example, Nijin Historical and Philological Institute, originally established as the Gymnasium of Higher Sciences in 1805, a Veterinary Institute, 1873, and a Technological Institute, 1885, in Kharkiv, a Polytechnic Institute in Kyiv, 1898, and a Higher Mining School, 1899, in Katerinoslav. Rapid growth followed in the Soviet period. By 1988, the number of higher education institutions increased to 146 with over 850,000 students. 370. The Ukrainian higher education system comprises higher educational establishments, scientific and methodological facilities under national, municipal and self-governing bodies in charge of education. 371. The organization of higher education in Ukraine is built up in accordance with the structure of education of the world's higher developed countries, as is defined by UNESCO and the UN. 372. Ukraine produces the fourth largest number of post-secondary graduates in Europe, while being ranked 7th in population. 373. Higher education is either state-funded or private. Most universities provide subsidized housing for out-of-city students. It is common for libraries to supply required books for all registered students. Ukrainian universities confer 2 degrees, the bachelor's degree, 4 years, and the master's degree, 5/6 year, in accordance with the Bologna process. Historically, specialist degree, usually 5 years, is still also granted. It was the only degree awarded by universities in Soviet times. 374. Ukraine was ranked 49th in the Global Innovation Index in 2021. 375. Regional differences. Ukrainian is the dominant language in western Ukraine and in central Ukraine, while Russian is the dominant language in the cities of eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine. In the Ukrainian SSR schools, learning Russian was mandatory. In modern Ukraine, Schools with Ukrainian as the language of instruction offer classes in Russian and in the other minority languages. 331, 376, 377, 378, on the Russian language, on Soviet Union and Ukrainian nationalism. Opinion in eastern Ukraine and southern Ukraine tends to be the exact opposite of those in western Ukraine, while opinions in central Ukraine on these topics tend to be less extreme. 377, 379, 380, 381, similar historical cleavages also remain evident at the level of individual social identification. Attitudes toward the most important political issue, relations with Russia, differed strongly between Lviv, identifying more with Ukrainian nationalism and the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and Donetsk, predominantly Russian-orientated and favorable to the Soviet era, while in central and southern Ukraine, as well as Kyiv, such divisions were less important and there was less the results of the 2014 parliamentary election with People's Front in yellow, Opposition Bloc in blue and Petro Poroshenko Bloc in red antipathy toward people from other regions. A poll by the Research and Branding Group held March 2010 showed that the attitude of the citizens of Donetsk to the citizens of Lviv was 79% positive and that the attitude of the citizens of Lviv to the citizens of Donetsk was 88% positive. 382, however, all were united by an overarching Ukrainian identity based on shared economic difficulties, showing that other attitudes are determined more by culture and politics than by demographic differences. 382, 383, surveys of regional identities in Ukraine have shown that the feeling of belonging to a Soviet identity is strongest in the Donbas, about 40%, and the Crimea, about 30%. 384. During elections, voters of western and central Ukrainian oblasts, provinces, vote mostly for parties, Al Ukraine, Bakivshkina, 385, 386, and presidential candidates, Viktor Yushchenko, Yulia Tymoshenko, with a pro-Western and state reform platform, while voters in southern and eastern oblasts vote for parties, CPU Party of Regions, and presidential candidates, Viktor Yanukovych, with a pro-Russian and status quo platform. 387, 388, 389, 390, however, this geographical division is decreasing. 391, 392, 393, culture. A collection of traditional Ukrainian Easter eggs paisanki. The design motifs on paisanki date back to early Slavic cultures. Ukrainian customs are heavily influenced by Orthodox Christianity, the dominant religion in the country. 394. Gender roles also tend to be more traditional, and grandparents play a greater role in bringing up children than in the West. 395. The culture of Ukraine has also been influenced by its eastern and western neighbors, reflected in its architecture, music and art. 396. The communist era had quite a strong effect on the art and writing of Ukraine. 397. In 1932, Stalin made socialist realism state policy in the Soviet Union when he promulgated the decree on the reconstruction of literary and art organizations. This greatly stifled creativity. During the 1980s, glasnost, openness, was introduced and Soviet artists and writers again became free to express themselves as they wanted. 398. As of 2022, UNESCO inscribed 7 properties in Ukraine on the World Heritage List. 399. Ukraine is also known for its decorative and folk traditions such as Petrikivka painting, Kosiv ceramics, and Cossack songs. 400, 401, 402. The tradition of the Easter egg, known as paisanki, has long roots in Ukraine. These eggs were drawn on with wax tar create a pattern. Then, the dye was applied to give the eggs their pleasant colors. The dye did not affect the previously wax-coated parts of the egg. After the entire egg was dyed, the wax was removed, leaving only the colorful pattern. This tradition is thousands of years old, and precedes the arrival of Christianity to Ukraine. 403. In the city of Kolomyia near the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains, the Museum of Paisanka was built in 2001, a nomination as the Monument of Modern Ukraine in 2007, part of the Seven Wonders of Ukraine Action. Literature. Technically, the history of Ukrainian literature dates all of the way back to the 11th century, following the Christianization of Kievan Rus. However, these earliest writings were liturgical and were written in the Old Church Slavonic language, not in true Ukrainian. Historical accounts of the time were referred to as chronicles, the most significant of which was the primary chronicle. 404, 405. G. Literary activity faced a sudden decline during the Mongol invasion of Rus. 404. Taras Shevchenko, self-portrait Ilsaya Ukrainka, one of the foremost Ukrainian women writers. Ukrainian literature again began to develop in the 14th century, and was advanced significantly in the 16th century with the invention of the printing press and with the beginning of the Cossack era. Under both Russian and Polish dominance. 404. The Cossacks established an independent society and popularized a new kind of epic poems, which marked a high point of Ukrainian oral literature. 405. These advances were then set back in the 17th and early 18th centuries, when publishing in the Ukrainian language was outlawed. Nonetheless, by the late 18th century, modern literary Ukrainian finally emerged. 404. In 1798, the modern era of Ukrainian literary tradition began with Ivan Kotlyarovsky's publication of Enida in the Ukrainian vernacular. 406. By the 1830s, a Ukrainian romantic literature began to develop, and the nation's most renowned cultural figure, romanticist poet-painter Taras Shevchenko, emerged. Whereas Ivan Kotlyarovsky is considered to be the father of literature in the Ukrainian vernacular, Shevchenko is the father of a national revival. 407. Then, in 1863, the use of the Ukrainian language in print was effectively prohibited by the Russian Empire. 68. This severely curtailed literary activity in the area, and Ukrainian writers were forced to either publish their works in Russian or release them in Austrian-controlled Galicia. The ban was never officially lifted, but it became obsolete after the revolution and the Bolsheviks coming to power. 405. Ukrainian literature continued to flourish in the early Soviet years when nearly all literary trends were approved. These policies faced a steep decline in the 1930s when prominent representatives as well as many others were killed by the NKVD during the Great Purge. In general, around 223 writers were repressed by what was known as the Executed Renaissance. 408. These repressions were part of Stalin's implemented policy of socialist realism. The doctrine did not necessarily repress the use of the Ukrainian language, but it required that writers follow a certain style in their works. Literary freedom grew in the late 1980s and early 1990s alongside the decline and collapse of the USSR and the re-establishment of Ukrainian independence in 1991. 404. Architecture. Ukrainian architecture includes the motifs and styles that are found in structures built in modern Ukraine, and by Ukrainians worldwide. These include initial roots which were established in the Eastern Slavic state of Kievan Rus. Since the Christianization of Kiev and our use for several ages, Ukrainian architecture was influenced by the Byzantine architecture. After the 12th century, the distinct architectural history continued in the Kingdom of Galicia Volhynia. 409.
Yes, I have recorded 2 hours 20 minutes. The video split in 3 minutes. I think I will take a break. I will continue. I need to charge the camcorder. It's 5:30 p.m. I will go to this computer game GTA 5. Yes, this old computer game GTA 5. But I got to there, the architecture. Just continue there. Let's close it. Just keep it open there. So yes, I will charge this camcorder. Then I will just continue later tonight. I need a break because I've been out today and this computer crashing like 5 times. And I made a lot of videos today, so I need a break. I just go to this GTA game and walk around a little bit. To explore this city called Los Santos. So I will do that at the same time. I will try to upload this 40 gigabyte game video from last night.